Hi, I'm Ella McCrystal, and this is The New Mind. Today's guest is the marvellous Dr. Esho. Dr. Esho has the Esho Clinic MD.
Yes.
Yes, in the UK, 3 actually, and 1 in Dubai. You may have seen him on This Morning. You may have seen him on the Body Fixers show, which I believe is on Netflix now. So watch it if you haven't already. And lots of other TV appearances. But today, actually, I wanted to talk to Dr. Esho about his life story, his success, the things that he's learned along the way. And I know that when you listen to this, despite the fact that some of it may seem circumstantial, some parts of the story, because it kind of has to be to weave it all together, I feel that so many of you are going to be inspired and motivated by the natural highs and lows of Dr. Esho's life. And I really want you to take away from this that no matter who you are, no matter what your life is right now, you can pretty much create the life that you dream of. And I know that that is what's going to come out of this, as well as some realness. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. I know that you are an extremely busy man.
Yeah.
So you giving your time today to be here is really special, and I really appreciate it. That introduction there is kind of just like 20 seconds worth of your life, but there's so much to go through. So I want to start at the beginning and really talk about little Dr. Esho.
Little Esho before the doctor.
Yeah, before the doctor was born.
Yeah.
Where did it start? Tell me about your life.
Yeah. So my life is very different then to it is now.
Yeah.
My parents both came from Nigeria. They came over to the UK in their 20s. I think that's quite common. A lot of people came to give their kids or the kids that they're going to have a better life,
They're
better
still
education.
Young.
Very, very young.
You know, 20s.
But I think that was the goal. My dad always told me they came across because they wanted my sister to have, and I to have better opportunities.
Yeah.
So I was the first born here. And at the time, my dad was an accountant in Nigeria already. But when he came across here, his qualifications weren't represented because it's not the same if you had it over there to here. So he had to work as a tiler, so putting tiles in a factory together with my mum. Wow. So that's what they were doing. They were getting handouts from the church. So we didn't really have a lot of money. You know, we grew up in a council estate in Tottenham at the time there. And I remember seeing that side of things, you know, getting exposed to things that I guess a lot of people probably wouldn't want their kids exposed to, but it's there, you know. So you would see crack addicts, you would see crime, you would see things happen, you know, and I think in a way almost normalized certain things to me.
Yeah.
So not a lot of stuff did shock me growing up as I grew up in that particular area.
Desensitized.
Desensitized, exactly. Yeah. And I think my parents wanted better. They knew this wasn't going to do great. So themselves, my dad re-educated himself here in the UK, trained as an accountant again.
Wow.
So got more money and we moved from there. We moved to Edmonton. Now, anyone that knows North London, Edmonton, it's better than Tottenham, but it was still not, it's still not, you know, where I am now, particularly. But it was to try and further and give me a better chance. At school, I was always getting into trouble, I think, initially. And I could have been written off, really, to be honest, as a kind of trouble kid, getting in trouble like most kids do in the area.
What sort of ways were you getting into trouble?
So I was always the class clown. You know, I would always be distracting everybody, had a mouth on me, you know, very cocky in that way. So I spent most of my time sitting outside of the lesson, you know, on the bench outside. You know, there was a kid I always saw down at the end of the corridor who was always out at the lessons as well. Hey, mate, yeah, same time next week. So it was there. And it was one teacher, Miss Eitel, who kind of got my parents in and said, look, I think your son is very smart. And I think the reason why he's playing up is because he's bored.
Yes.
And, you know.
Good teacher.
Yeah. And honestly, if I can find her today, I've tried to. I owe her a lot because from that pivoted my whole journey in terms of education because she saw that. And if she didn't, I would have been written off that complete way. No focus was taken. And she said, I'm going to give him some extra classes and see what happens.
Amazing.
And I started to calm down. I started to calm down naturally. I started to apply myself and excel in doing that. And she said, okay, I want to put him a year ahead. I want to put him a year ahead and see what happens. And they put me a year ahead, and I even calmed down even more. So then he realized at that point that, you know, it was just boredom. I was understanding things and I was getting ahead. But once I've finished and I've understood it, lesson over for me, I was then distracting everybody else. And that took her to see that. And that's why now, even with my son, you know, the school he goes to, I'm always about small numbers and everything like that, because I think teachers are so important in the journey, because that my life would have went 2 different ways with that point.
You're so right. What an amazing point already to make, because I do fear that the education system is broken. And if those teachers aren't seeing the child, the individual, like you say, different ending for you.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. So I'm really pleased you referenced that.
Yeah. And then from there, it was like, okay, he can do all this. And my dad was really, you know, a very stoic, strict Nigerian man. So in the house, you know, A's were expected, you know, so there was no celebration about it. A B was like, you want to move out, you know, you want me to send you back to Nigeria. It was that like threat all the time. So there was a lot of pressure on me once this was realized that there was a potential here to fulfill whatever that potential was, not just for me, but for my parents. I was very gifted at art and drawing and graphic design. And that's where, even though I was doing great at the rest of the lessons, that's what I wanted to do initially. And my dad didn't see that as a career. My dad was very, again, when a lot of people that come from ethnic minorities will obtain to this, a lot of families see, you know, your traditional law, accounts, engineering, dentistry. These are the careers because they're safe, you know, and because they can give you a legacy going forward, and they're always needed. So that's where it was seen you should go in for. My dad was like, art and graphics is not that, you know, so he was very much pushing me down the line to do either finance or medicine. And I had a work experience that he had set up, Whittington Hospital, and I went into it thinking, oh, I don't want to do this. Saw the surgeon there, and I thought, wow, everybody really respects this guy. I've never seen that level of respect. He came on the ward, everybody was running after him, everybody was going for him. And I thought, okay, maybe I do want this. You know, just by the way he was treated, I thought, okay, I want to be treated like that, you know, not really knowing much about the job. But
so that's quite a fundamental moment. You got this teacher, sees you for who you are, work experience, not really bothered, but then you see, this man gets treated like he's something special.
Exactly.
I want a piece of this.
I want a piece of this. I was like, I don't know how to, but okay, maybe my dad was right, you know. So then I remember coming back to school saying, right, you know, to the head of the year, I want to apply for med school. And I was really discouraged, you know, which shocked me. You know, I thought, oh, you know, you guys will be really pleased and applying myself and do. And they were like, well, you know, we've got to be realistic. You know, if that doesn't happen, you know, what other ideas do you have? And that was really upset my parents. You know, they were really angry. You know, they said to ignore it. You know, we just focused on what we had to do. And I got into medical school, you know, and I remember the first day being there, you know, my dad, everybody's parents were hugging the kids. My dad shook my hand like I was a soldier on the way to like military school. And my mum was like hugging me. He's like, no, we don't hug. He's here to do a job, you know. And I remember distinctly looking around thinking, I don't belong here. You know, no one looks like me here. No one speaks like me here. You know, I was in a place where, you know, from speaking, families of doctors, you know, people from middle class up, you know, no one was from, you know, the ends, as you say, where I grew up. So I remember thinking, God, like, do I belong here?
Was it scary?
Yeah, because I think I was taken out of an environment where I was used to. You know, I was used to that environment. I remember the first time where I got opportunity to be taken out of that. So there was this school called Latimer, which was this really top school. And my dad wanted me to go to it. But all my friends were going to the other school, the county school. And so I wanted to be where everyone knew. And again, I remember on the inset day, I was seeing people in the school that didn't look like me. They were totally different. And my dad was like, "You're going to go?" And I was like, "I don't want to go." And he said, "Look, okay, if you go to the county, as long as you're getting your grades, that was fine." And that was the first time I realized being in an environment of people like you gave you that comfort.
Of course, big thing, comfort
Yeah,
zone.
exactly. But then going into med school and seeing that and doing it, I thought I made the wrong decision here. Like I almost felt imposter syndrome. I felt I don't belong here,
Yeah.
because this isn't what people like me do.
How are they treating you though?
So I would say it was a bit like a novelty in a sense. I think, I was one of two black people in my year at that time.
How many were in your year?
Couple hundred in there.
What?
Yeah,
Whoa.
yeah. So like there was myself and another guy called O. And when I saw him, we naturally
Yeah.
beelined for each other.
Yeah.
And then I remember we were walking across the corridor and we were seeing all the photos of the people in the year. We were like seeing the absence of black faces,
Yes.
and in each year there may be one or none. And so we were like, one of us is only going to make it statistically wise,
Yeah.
but we both made it, thank goodness. But I think people were interested in our stories. People were interested in how we grew up, where we grew up. And one thing we realized very quickly, myself and O, was we had a certain life experience a lot of people didn't have. So in terms of a naivety, I give one example always. My friend, I won't name his name to say it, but I remember this car pulling up outside the school and it had these two guys in it, and they said they're selling laptops. And my mate was, "Oh God," I said, "Mate, don't bother with that. It's a scam." And he was like, No, let me go look. And the guys were like, "Oh, we've got a laptop, half price, all of this stuff." And he was like, "Oh my God, I want that laptop." So he went to get money. They said, "I'll meet us around the corner." So yeah, when I met him around the corner, got the laptop, ran back into uni, went to try and open it, could open it, opened it. There was just stone blocks inside there. So they'd
Oh
done the switch.
my
They'd done the
gosh.
switch on him. And I knew it was going to go that way.
Yeah.
I said, "Actually, you're lucky. Actually, you came back with that. I thought they would just rob you there and
Yeah.
then."
Yeah.
But it was, again, just he was from a very sheltered environment, very privileged, had everything, didn't know those aspects of the world in that way, where for me, I saw that happening every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So I'd already realized, okay, there's an advantage. All the disadvantages I was thinking about, I was like, actually, there's an advantage to where I've come from.
Because you're weaving parts of life together in a way that other people just couldn't.
Mm.
You're making decisions and choices in a way that other people can't because they don't know.
No.
And you've got this wealth of knowledge plus the intelligence and the determination. I think you were motivated by the surgeon. So you've got all these already so young. Because how old are you in med? Is it after
med school? So when we're going there, we're going in 18, and then we're leaving. It's 5 years, so we're leaving when we're about 23.
So you're really young to be able to, I think, have that broader perspective. So although it doesn't come easy, because you've had lots of life experiences that perhaps haven't been easy up until that point, there's this understanding of human nature, which is often lacking in privileged circles.
No, definitely. And from that, those skills, I use those a lot in communication.
Yes.
So in terms of those parts, I would excel a lot. Awareness of that, awareness of people's cultures. And yeah, it took me as part of my strength to graduate. And when I graduated, I remember my dad, that's the first time I saw him cry. I'd never seen him cry before. I thought he was unwell. I didn't know what was going on.
Help him.
And I asked my mum, and my mum was like, "He just feels like his job is done."
Yeah.
I think that was the other pressure I wasn't aware of. He had that pressure of making me something.
That's why they moved here.
He made. Why?
Yeah.
That's why they moved here. That's how they done. So he had that immense pressure, and I remember only realizing at that stage what he must have gone through, because at the time then I just thought it was a lot unfair. I just thought, man, this is too much strictness. This is too much pressure. But I got it. I understood why he did it. And I'm grateful to this day that he did.
Yeah.
Because of it. But it does also, in a way, not scar you, but I think living with that level of expectation and pressure is a lot.
It is a lot. I mean, again, most people, I would say, will not understand the amount of pressure that you were under at such a young age. And I always say, actually, because prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed, that's the analysis, decision kind of is the word, decision making, logic, and emotional regulation. It's not fully formed till you're 21, sometimes 25. So with all that pressure going on, your brain is actually adapting in a very different way. Good and bad comes with that, of course. But I do think there's a level of maybe abandonment there. Did it feel like your needs were sometimes abandoned because the pressure took over?
I think, there was a time, I remember I joke about it now, but was I adopted or something? Because I think there was things that I know I'm different as a dad now to my kids are. So my dad wasn't really vocal in terms of, I never heard him really say, I love you, or hugs or kisses, I think his version of what love was, okay, I've given you education, a house over your head, clothes.
Yeah.
That's love. So when you don't have that, you sometimes you question what's your purpose, is it just to be this thing and,
Am I
a machine and do that rather than just a person?
Yeah.
And that can be hard. That can be really hard.
So the human element of being the child, the playfulness, the curiosity, the love, you felt that wasn't always your experience.
I don't think it was ever on purpose.
No.
I think culturally it was a lot there. I think, I've got a lot of friends who grew up in similar backgrounds, same backgrounds that grew up the same way. And we talk about it a lot, how, that side wasn't as prevalent. And maybe that's why we're so open with our affection to our kids now.
Which
because
is beautiful.
We probably thought, okay, I didn't have that. And I think maybe part of the drive, or my drive, was to get that, I think to kind of get this validation or this feeling, or for them to say those words or show it, it was like, okay, I need to be successful, I need to succeed. So I'd almost linked the two together. So that's what drove me more. I was like, right, if I do better, then they will love or show me love more.
So now love is like a commodity.
Yeah.
I've got to earn love.
Yeah.
And that's tough. That definitely does shape the brain. It does, because and you've obviously been able to view it. Again, your multifaceted approach to life is that you can see the broader perspective. That seems to be your skill set amongst others. But not everybody ever works that out. So you'll see that people that psychological safety involves love and nourishment from the heart, I guess. And those that haven't received that, sometimes they become very maladaptive. So was there actually those maladaptive parts of you before perhaps you had children, after medical school, doing so well? Were there maladaptive behaviours, do you think?
Probably. I would say that for me, they always say like workaholic is like a good thing, but actually it's not that good. And I think that probably was that. I put that into overdrive. So I was blinkered and so focused on being successful that in the time got me, missing birthdays, being the son that never called as much, or the brother that didn't pick up the phone as much, because I was so overwhelmed by this whole process that I had to be successful. It took over every other aspect of life.
So the humanness, I always refer to that, the humanness, the heart-mind connection wasn't flowing. You weren't in the flow state. What was happening is you became the machine. And your relationships with human beings were second.
Always, even if that, relationships always ended in the same way. It was always because I was so focused on work, and that was secondary, and I always felt it was like, well, you don't understand. I've got an opportunity, we live once, I really want to make this. So, and I think it was funny because, especially in the earlier days, you know, just graduating from med school and having that such determination, sometimes you could be seen as a dreamer because people don't see the vision you see. You know, you have created this vision in your head of what you want to do. I remember when I first told my colleague, oh, you know, I'm going to build this clinic, you know, it's going to be global. You know, he had the smirk on his face.
As if to say, all right, mate.
Yeah, you know,
chill your boots.
This is it. And, you know, he still knows me to this day. He works at one of my clinics and, you know, he reminds me of it. And he was like, yeah, I remember, like, I could see the overall determination in your face. But then there's other people that just take it the other way and they're just like, oh, you're just a dreamer, you know, you're gassed, as my mates would say. You know, you're not thinking real here. You know, and that frustrates you because then if people don't see it or don't want it as much as you, again, that can be another maladaptive trait because you get upset that why aren't you working as hard as me? You know, why aren't you wanting this as much as me? You know, why are you just sitting there? That became quite hard.
It does feel like you were a finely tuned engine and that you were really unable to move out of that space. Perhaps it was, you talked about the comfort zone earlier. Perhaps it was so comfortable for you to be the machine and probably really uncomfortable for you to have relationships and love and time with people as a priority. You hadn't really known that. In fact, I think the moment that teacher said, look, this boy is special, he's too clever for this, you then went into a different zone and never went back. But also something you said there about creating the dream, you are actually naturally, from the sounds of it, quite a creative person. The artistic side of you, that graphic design and the art, it's actually really blended together very well because your vision has become the reality. The robot or the machine was able to employ the creativity, but equally you have built relationships. You know, you can't build 4 clinics, have all those patients, you know, have the TV stuff if you're not good with people. So how did that happen? If you were lacking in that, how did you become this people person?
I think so. Going back to the kid in the class who was always being the kind of class clown and joker and bits in that way, I always like to kind of entertain. You know, so no matter how hard I worked, that kind of want to entertain and make people laugh was always there. So I guess that was a trait that was endearing to people.
So that's your natural personality.
So that's my natural, you know, to kind of want to entertain and do that despite wanting to work. It was like, okay, we can play, but we need to get the job done. And I always said that, you know. So I kind of looked for like people in that way. I kind of, again, going back to natural, those were the people that I naturally became around and became part of what I was doing. It was people that were laser focused, but then also could have a good laugh at the same time. And that's where that joined in, you know. And I think in relationships, I naturally found it better in relationships with partners or women who were driven. You know, so had this idea or this vision of where we want to go to and what we want to do and what we want to create. So, you know, it's almost like we're all dreamers together. So that's nice. That was my kind of home in the people around me that I would go to.
And so you start with, when you have the vision to build the clinic, and then number 2, number 3, Dubai comes along. I mean, I know from personal experience that running a clinic, having, you know, your list of patients, being that person that people want, sounds great on paper, but you did that 3 times in the UK and then in Dubai. How, first of all, how on earth have you managed to stay in good health?
Sometimes I do.
Wow, is all I can say, because it's hard work. And on top of that, you really built the brand and you built your presence within the TV stuff that you've done as well. That's a heck of a lot to fit. I mean, you're 41. It's a lot to do. And you've got 2 children and you've got your long-term partner. So you've done a lot in that time. How does one do that?
Whew,
That's a really big question.
It is a big question, and it's one that I think I only ever got time to stop to think was in the pandemic. Like, for life for me was, like you say, it was that kind of, I was constantly chasing the next thing.
Yeah.
Because that feeling of success or doing something well was my validation. You know, that's what I had self-learned.
Yeah.
So when I said, right, I'm going to do this clinic, then it was, okay, get the clinic bigger. Then it was like, move on to the next thing. And there wasn't a kind of satisfaction. There was always the next. Yeah. So that continued, and that was just a cycle of things that continued. And for me, I look back, it wasn't healthy, you know, from a time, minimal sleep, you know, relationships, you know, broke down because of overworking. And, you know, you get to a place where then you're like, okay, I'm moving at 100 miles an hour, but what for? You know? And there was different points in my life that made me kind of, I'll call these checkpoints. So the first was when my mum got diagnosed with cancer. You know, that just hit me like a ton of bricks, because, you know, you hear about cancer everywhere and everything, and not until it personally involves you and your family.
Everyone says that.
Yeah. Do you then realize that? And when that happened and we almost lost her, she's like the glue that hold the family together. Yeah. You know, for all the bits that I didn't get from my dad, I would say I got from my mum.
Yeah.
And thinking that could be gone, like, that shook me. And I think that was the first point that started to make me look at more than just the work, you know? So then we had that. The second big bit was when we nearly lost our son, Roman.
Who's 4 now.
Who's 4 now. So the pandemic, like with everyone, it made a stop for the first time. You know, everybody was on lockdown. But whilst everybody was going into lockdown, our son had been taken into ITU. And he was 15 months old at that stage.
Awful.
And he was on a ventilator in ICU for 10 days.
What happened?
They weren't sure. They thought it was at first COVID.
Right.
It turned out to be paroxysmal virus, another virus. But it was a very scary time, you know, because everybody was dying from COVID. Everybody didn't know what was going on.
Horrific.
And, you know, I was there helpless with my son and Mrs. and we were thinking we're going to lose him.
With all the restrictions as well.
Yeah. So they had told us at that point that when he got unwell, that we couldn't be with him. And
you couldn't be with him.
And yeah, it wasn't going to happen, you know. I think, yeah, that
you were not.
There was a lot of language that I can't speak in here that was said, and you know, I was like, I don't even care if I have to sleep on the floor in the side room, and we never leave this room. We are with him. He's 15 months old, you know.
My God.
I think the bed manager came down and she spoke with us and she said, okay, look, let them. Because, you know, and I don't blame them because people weren't knowing how to deal with it. You know, they just were given these rules and they just said, right, follow, you know. But the human in her saw, it was like, these are two parents. This kid is 15 months old. You can't be away from them, you know. So I remember in that time going to, like, I was praying to God. I was like, look, if it means take me, you know, this boy hasn't even lived, you know, just trade, you know, in there. And when they excubate him, that's when they take out the tubes to see if he can breathe on his own. And he did. Honestly, it was, yeah, that was a big life check in terms of that all what I'm doing wouldn't have mattered if he was gone at that point.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. That's the biggest realization ever, isn't it?
Yeah. That all what I was doing would not matter. And I think that's when I started again, just looking at answering the question of why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And really analyzing. I became very self-reflective. Like I started analyzing everything. Like, you know, I got on the front of Times magazine, like, you know, no one really does that. And when I did it, everybody, I think, was more excited than I was.
Like, such an anticlimax.
Yeah,
for you.
It was so weird. It was, you know, and I'm glad that happened earlier on because that to me was like, okay, this is a pinnacle for a lot of people. And I'm sitting here like, okay, what's next? And I realized at that point, after that, with all this self-reflection from the stuff that's happening in my personal life, I'm not going to get happiness or what true validation inside is by this work.
No.
It's not going to come. It isn't going to come. And actually what I learned was the opposite, was the more successful I became, the more disadvantages sometimes it came. I became this target.
We said this when you're at the top, you are a target now.
Yeah. And I think that's a hard thing for a lot of people to grasp, because, when they see success, they see all the shiny things and they see all the bits around and they go, well, what's there to complain about? And I'm very careful, because I am very grateful for what it's given me in life and the life of my kids. But I don't think anyone would want it knowing fully sometimes what comes with it.
You were targeted quite really badly.
Exactly. From jealousy, anger, everything, and it becomes hard, and you almost want to just hide away.
Because you're not that person that they're trying to say you are.
Yeah.
You know that you're not here for that. You never intended that. You were literally, to recap, sorry to put in there, but you were kind of doing this for your dad.
Yeah.
And then you realized, oh, this surgeon gets all this respect and I want some of that. And you were driven by that. Then you worked so hard. Medical school isn't easy. You've got to be some kind of character with some kind of intelligence to do that. You go through that. You start building your business, like you say, sometimes without sleep. In the meantime, a bit later on, your mum gets cancer. Your child ends up in this awful situation where, and then people target you, think, well, yeah, you've got a nice watch, so you deserve it. No, like you work. Well, you certainly did, and you still do work very, very hard. And if people do that, it shows how small-minded they are. And I'm not one to berate other people, but I think at the same time, it hurts sometimes to see other people being targeted just because they've done well. Celebrate people's success, like elevate them, and maybe you'll elevate yourself in the process.
Yeah, I completely feel that way. For me, what always driven me was when also I see other people do well.
Yeah.
I would always be happy for it. I'd always dissect it.
Yeah.
See what I can do and go and actually ask questions.
Be curious.
But what I found was the more I did, the more anger from set groups of people came. And that was really hard to take, because you were like, well, what am I supposed to do? And I know that'll be hard for people to define, because they go, well, it came in different forms. Racism was huge. I remember, when I first started Body Fixers, they were like, oh, they've already got a doctor because he's black, to be cool, oh, is he Dr. Dre? Is that his name? So it was little stuff like that.
Pathetic.
Yeah. And then when I had my son, it was faceless accounts, people messaging saying, oh, just because he's half white, he's still a monkey, just so much stuff that you think, my God, like, just because I'm on this platform, you feel you have the ability to say this to me, what are you trying to achieve out of it, so yeah, that was really hard. And I think I always say, if I could have got to where I am now with actually no one knowing me, as I said to you, I would have done that. Because what happens is you're able to live your life in private, but you also have to make your mistakes in private. And you're all human. And I was then also very aware of that by my dad, because even when I was getting more successful, my dad was always more worrying. I used to say to him, why? And he would always say something. The thing is, when they build you up, they will want to bring you down.
And don't we love to do that in the UK in particular? Let's really put them on a pedestal. Now we're ready for ruining them. We're going to ruin them.
And that's what my dad was always scared of. My dad was always worried about. He always would say, look, son, you got all the qualifications, so no one's going to doubt that. Your work's there, so no one's going to doubt that. They will come for your character.
Yeah, they will. Yeah.
That's what they'll do, because then no one can ever know you like we know you, or the people around. And people want to believe what they want to believe.
Yeah.
And so
it makes them feel better about themselves.
So, for all the separation, my dad always found that harder.
Yeah. Of
Because he was
course.
always worried about that for me. From seeing it happen to a lot of people, especially a lot of black people, he would see it happen. So that kind of stayed with him in that way.
Well, you know, as a parent, as you'll know, you are never going to stop wanting to protect your child.
Mm,
And for your dad to come from Nigeria so young, witness how his friends were being treated,
mm,
and then sort of understanding, look, I've got to tell you, this is going to happen to you. This is
mm,
what people do. This is
mm,
how people behave.
mm,
And people like to think that the UK is this really lovely, racist free place.
mm,
It's not.
mm,
It's not. It's absolutely still rife.
mm.
It's just that, like you say, it's often by faceless accounts now.
Yeah. And it's just like, I think you got to have a strong skin to get past it.
You
And I think
definitely
that's
do.
what I developed through that time.
Does it hurt though? I mean, especially when
Yeah.
it's targeted at your child as
Yeah,
well.
that hurts me more. I
Mm,
think I got to a place where I could be numbed by it with me.
mm.
But when it was my kids, I was like,
That's,
this is an innocent
yeah.
child,
How do you do that
a
to
beautiful
anyone?
child. How can you say such a thing,
Although I say, how do you do it to anyone?
Yeah.
Honestly, I know because it's your child, you're going to
Mm,
feel it more because you
mm,
want to protect your child. But
yeah.
sitting here, you know,
Yeah.
in my privileged position as a white lady, I still
Mm,
think, why would anyone want to hurt anybody else
yeah.
just because you can?
Yeah.
Like, and just pick the most obvious thing. Of course, we can all see color. Doesn't mean we need to be horrible about it.
Yeah.
But I always think that's because they're weak. If
I know.
you're weak, you will pick on somebody. That's as simple as it gets. But it doesn't make it any easier to go through, especially when it's generational trauma and you know you've witnessed it happening to your parents and you know that's happened to your grandparents. You know, it's not okay.
No.
And I know that it's harder when you're a parent to see it happen to your own child, but it doesn't matter whether it's a child or an adult. If you're doing that to someone, you're scum.
Yeah.
And I don't like to judge people, but when it comes to that kind of stuff,
Mm,
that's the truth of it.
mm,
And as we tell your story and see how hard you've worked and the success, it's still shit
yeah.
that along the way you've been targeted because you are black.
Yeah. But we almost, it's sad because we almost come to accept it. We
I
always
know.
come to take it as it is. And, what I found was, unfortunately, and probably a lot of people can attain this, the more successful you are, the less black people there are in the room.
Yeah.
And it came to many points that I was the only black person in the room.
Yeah.
Each time. And, it was very aware of it. And yeah, I was always, certain people that had certain biases already were very careful about what words they chose around me, but they were always like, well, you're different. They would always say, oh, but you're different. And I'd be like, what do you mean different? Like,
Yeah. Please quantify that for me.
Quantify that. What does that mean? And you kind of just brushed it off your shoulder. Like, and I thought by doing so much and then being able to live where I live now would escape that, and be, but actually it's worse, in some
Yeah.
ways, yes, now I'm away from, when I grew up, there was drugs, there was crime, there was all of that around. Very safe area, private estate, very lucky to be there. But now there's the kind of class privileges and the changes in there and the worries now I have for my kid.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, he's growing up with everything now. So how do I make him hungry like I was to go forward in life? So it does have its different challenges.
Definitely. And I suppose what you've said there, I've actually had this conversation before about race, and I feel really immature when I'm having it because I'll say stuff like, it's disgusting and da da da. And then the person of color will say, well, yeah, but you've kind of got to adjust to it. You've got to, and it does feel like a strange area to sit in for me because I'm really angry about it. That's still happening to you, to your children, to whoever you're around that is experiencing that, to my friends, to whoever. I'm still really angry about it. But I also realize that you cannot afford to be angry about it.
No, because it makes it almost worse.
Yeah.
It almost makes it worse. So you kind of, and I think when it happens enough, which is unfortunate, you do become normalized to it, no matter how much, the first times it happened. So I remember the first time it happened, I cried. The first time it happened, it was in medical school. I was a med student at the time. and everybody was doing baby checks. It was a pediatric rotation, so he did the baby checks when they were born. And my ward partner did her baby check. She was white. And I went to do the baby check, and the mum said, no, not him. You can't touch my baby. I first didn't register. I thought, oh, like something's on my hand, dirty, bits. And then it registered. And I remember that evening crying. I remember going home. I remember crying. I remember being in the canteen afterwards, feeling like all eyes were on me. I almost became aware I was different. I knew it was different, but it was almost all of a sudden, I was looking at any glance or look in that place, I'm different. And I remember actually feeling so bad I didn't want to do medicine anymore. And I remember speaking to my mum and her saying to me, like, look, I brought you into this world. It's up to you to let the world know when you have arrived. She goes, wow, that's what you need to do. You need to know. And so little sayings like that, little things like that, it built this resilience. Yeah. It built this kind of ability to keep pushing forward. And whenever something happened, I would adapt to it, because I was like, look, I've been in worse situations here, and I've come through it. Yeah. So that became my learning pattern. I was like, look back each time something bad has happened, you have gone forward. So actually then you didn't become fearful. Yeah. You almost look, well, I'm going to get past this. Yes. I'm going to move past this. Yeah. And that's what pushes you forward. That's power. Yeah. That's real power. And that's why I say I feel a bit immature, because, I haven't had to build that. I'm an observer in a world that isn't fair and feel angry about it. But because I haven't had to build that and have that experience, I haven't got that power that you have, which is magical, that and your mum gave you that, and your parents gave you that, and that you've been able to go, okay, that's weak, I'm not engaging with it, move on, I'm going to show you. Yeah. And I love that. I think it's something that a lot of people, because you've had to adapt to it and it's become desensitized, you almost take it for granted in yourself. But as an observer of that, I'm just like, wow, to put up with that shit from other people and just rise above it. No excuses, rise above. I think that's really phenomenal. Thank you. And I do, but that's with all adversity, isn't it? You've got to rise up. If you know yourself that you are special, and there's nothing wrong with that, because I think a lot of people are shy to say, actually, I've got something special here. If you know yourself, you're special, and you've got something to offer this world, you stay focused on that no matter what. And that's what you've done. That's what you have to, because I think when you do or focus on that, it doesn't matter what other people say. Yeah. And there will be voices along that journey, whether they're familiar ones or people you don't know, that will put doubt in your mind. Yes. You have to have that self-belief. And I think that does come from, I see a lot of successful people, and I always say they're scarred in some way. Yeah, they are. And I think that scarring can either become your superpower or your detriment. So true. I think you can use it to kind of propel you forward. Yeah. Or you can use it to kind of your own destruction. Pain is a blessing. Yeah. Pain is a gift. It's not nice. No. It feels horrible. In fact, it's probably one of the worst things you'll ever feel. But it is a gift. It's often hard to articulate that, isn't it? Because I'm always aware of people listening, and I'm always aware of people going, well, yeah, but I'm going through pain and I don't know how to use it as a powerful gift yet. And unfortunately, it doesn't come like that. You can't just hear a quote and go, all right, well, that's fine then. That's what I'll do. You have to live it. The experience is what gives you the resilience. The experience is what gives you the wisdom. The experience is what gives you the power. And you have to gather it. Yeah. It's a journey, and it's so cheeseball, but it is, isn't it? It's a journey, but there's fundamentals that you have. Your character, your natural personality is one of them. You can't take that away from anybody. Like, don't forget the USP is you. Yeah. People buy from people. Yeah. So your natural personality is part of your gift, but then your determination and your drive, which is the will to prove something to your dad, because he really needed you to do that. Yeah. And then you've got this other bit. And this, I think it's like there's a softer side as well. When you're talking about your son there's a strength with that softness, but there's this
Again, I think it's the ability to relate to others, which is a natural empathy, which I guess you have to have as a doctor, but not all doctors have it.
No, not all. Yeah, but you develop it. But I think, again, from where you grow up and you're having so many people from so many different cultures, so many different walks of life, going through so many different things. I think empathy and the ability to communicate really is a superpower for people in those areas, you know. And I feel that that's been, for me, being able to adapt to so many different environments because of that, and understand that, you know, if I have patients and whatever background they come from, I'm already aware. I'm already, you know, things. So I'm already in tunes to them.
You're blending.
And I'm blending. But then also I have the ability, because of where the level of success gave me, to be in those rooms, that if I'm then on a board of something, to adapt to them. I think they call it code switching. So like I can be either of those people in all of those different environments.
And that's your superpower. Like you say, you've got the superpower of resilience, the superpower of your natural inbuilt personality, and then this superpower to do this code switch. I love that, by the way. I've never heard anyone say about code switching, but that's a really cool phrase. I'm going to use that with my impatience. I'm going to pretend that I own it. No, I'll give you credit.
I can't even take credit.
I was going to say, did you trademark that?
That's not mine. That's not mine.
You're going to have to trademark it soon, because otherwise I will. No, I won't. But yeah, this code switching thing where you go from one space to another, you've got some really, despite the fact that you've obviously worked really hard to be the doctor, those bits are really fundamentally important to your success, aren't they?
Definitely. And I think when things happen, those all go into overdrive. So, you know, the biggest thing for me when you said pain is a gift is when my dad died.
Yes.
You know, my dad, for those that don't know, was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And
can I just reference something there? I didn't realize it was prostate cancer. Isn't it really under isn't there a massive misconception about prostate cancer in Black communities?
Yeah.
Right, that was something.
It's more prevalent in Black men.
That's right.
And, you know, cancer overall in Black communities it's not spoken about enough.
Yeah.
You know, I did a piece for BBC on, you know, cancer in Black communities and about how we need to talk about it more.
We do.
Because particularly it's seen as this death sentence.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, for my dad, he had symptoms but kept it to himself.
Oh, no.
And that, again, double whammy. Being a man, we don't talk about things. Being a Black man, we don't even talk about things twice. So and that's what hurts. He probably, if he had spoken about it, we could have caught it sooner, but he didn't. And so by the time he spoke about it, it was already quite advanced.
That's sad.
And for me, that I still now struggle with, because, you know, I almost feel like I failed him in some instances, in the sense that if I could have, I spend my time on my job, you know, body fixer, being a fixer, right? I fix things. And the one thing I couldn't fix was him.
Yeah, that's a lot of difficult, complex things to go through.
Yeah. And so watching him go from this great man, like, he's still a great man, but I mean, this figure, you know, he was short, but he was stocky, big hands, you know, having a man to break down to be like so frail and confused and everything to the last days. And, you know, I was telling you, I was there going to work, going straight back with him for palliative care at home, because we had him at home. And the last day I was there, you know, and I felt like I gave him permission to go, because, you know, at that point he wasn't communicating anymore, just looking and breathing. And I remember just looking at him saying, "It's okay, Dad. Like, it's okay. Like, Mum, I'll take care of Mum. I'll take care of Sis. Like, it's okay. You can go." And he went. And it still sticks with me now. But that made the big reflection on where I was going in life with chasing this success.
Because he had been the powerful force behind everything you'd done. Sometimes you weren't getting the love you needed, but like, I can just tell by how you've spoken about him, you have so much respect for him.
I owe him everything.
Yeah. And just everything. When we talk about them coming here at 20, I think about myself at 20. You know, moving to a new town would have been a big deal, let alone a completely different, well, it's a different planet. And England is not what it looks like in the books.
No.
You know, it was a different, they would probably thought, what on earth is this place? What are we doing? But they knew there was this opportunity for their children that weren't even born yet. And that is just, you know, so much just in that decision to come here to, it must be so scary. So scary. And the reception, I would imagine, of a lot of the people here would not have been welcoming. And so they would have gone through so many different struggles and had, like you say, your dad would have had so much to prove. Like, we've done the right thing. Look at what I've done. So this powerful man, this powerful force of energy, this determination for you to have this amazing life, which you've got. And then to see him physically change like that, and to know there's nothing you can do. And you said you felt like you failed him. The thing is, hindsight's a beautiful thing, isn't it? This is obviously very cliche because everyone says this, but hindsight's a beautiful thing because you could see the moments perhaps where it was obvious, but you can't know in that moment. You only know what you know. And he made that decision to hold back because he was scared. And the reason he was scared is because people weren't talking about these things. And this is why this episode, amongst other parts of your story, will be so bloody important. That it's so important to talk about the fear of death, the fear of cancer. In communities like the Black community, which is inherently known for not talking about really serious issues, the more Black faces or people of colour that talk about really serious issues, the more we can change that cultural aspect and do some, that's the gift. That's the gift of what you're doing today. Is so, and I know you've spoken about it before, like you say on BBC and so on, is so important. You know, changing that narrative and making it a regular conversation that you have with your mates, or that you know you have when you're driving to work, whatever it is. It's so important. And for you to be there with him in those final moments, by the way, this is just so beautiful. To have that opportunity to be with him and to give him that permission. But also, I think for you, it must have just been profoundly painful.
It's hard because we all grieve differently. And I think for me, my sister and I think she couldn't see why I couldn't do certain things. So when they went to the crematorium to see him before, I couldn't see that.
No.
But it's because I was there.
Yeah.
And I saw that I was the one that, you know, I did the hard parts. I was always that way. So to be the protector. So my mum and my sister were downstairs when the people came to take the body. You know, I saw them zip up my dad. I saw everything.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I was trying so hard to hold myself together. I knew there were certain moments that would break me. And so, like, I couldn't go to the burial site, you know, I couldn't do that. You know, I couldn't do set things. And I think that frustrated my sister because she thought I didn't care as much. And then, you know, but then she understood that when I finally did, and she saw me that didn't, and she'd never seen me that way. You know, she got it. She was like, you're holding it together because you've got so much going on and so many people relying on you that, like I said, that level of pressure that you're like, I can't afford to. I almost at that point was like, I can't afford to grieve.
Yes.
I can't, you know, because if I go to this place, which I'm scared to go to, like, I don't know if I come back from it. You know, I'm so used to protecting myself and going forward and forward that, you know, I was like, I can't go back.
You ended up quite unwell for a little while in terms of you had anxiety, didn't you? First time.
Yeah, first time understanding what that was. You know, after my dad passed, I remember it. I was literally about to get on a flight and I had a message. It was something stressful happening at work. And I started getting this pain in my chest. And I thought it was a heart attack. I honestly thought, oh, this God, this is what it must feel like. And I couldn't catch my breath. I couldn't do anything. And I remember just trying to calm myself down, and it went. And I thought, what was that? Like, I've
Wow.
never felt that in my life. And to go for someone who was confident and self-aware and do this, to feel that, and it then to start to creep up into different elements. So I noticed that I felt like that resilience was gone.
Yeah.
I was going into situations where normally I would have just trailblazed through, and then to get in these manifestations of feeling ill, feeling, anxious, feeling this. And I was like, no, what's going on
The
here?
contrast between the two versions.
Between this, and, I went and saw a doctor in the first time in my whole life. I'd never been to the doctors. I'd literally never been,
No way.
And I remember it because the doctor was like, I have nothing for you on record. So it was just like one of those weird things. And actually the doctor said, which was quite right, actually, doctor is like, I always get worried when there's nothing on record for someone and they come in.
Yeah.
Because when they come in, then it's something.
It's full to the brim.
It's something serious, And, I started telling him, and he was like, look, I think this is anxiety you're suffering from. Your dad, I think, was the final block, He says, you're building this work, you've got this stress from press, you've got the stress from TV, home, expectation, everything else. You're almost losing your son, and you've just kept going.
Yeah.
And then that's done that. And, I remember initially at first they were like, right, we can give you these tablets. I was like, no, I don't want any tablets, I can do this on my own. And you have a connotation about what that is, even being a doctor who's given tablets.
This is the irony.
This is the irony. And so I remember going, no, I'm going to do the CBT, I'm going to do that, I'm going to take care of myself more, I'm going to do that. But it just wasn't working, alone. And so in the end, they said, look, sertraline, try it. I remember the first days taking it thinking, oh my God, this is the worst decision ever, because it made me feel worse.
It does for some people.
And that's what it does for some people.
Yeah.
Like, I just thought, oh, what is happening here? But then it started to work, together with, CBT and counseling and that together, it started to work. And it really made me, I was already, like I said, in that self-reflective mode, but it really started to make me understand life.
Yeah.
Like, really, really started.
Life or living?
Living. I really was aware of what made my body feel good and what it didn't,
Because I said to you earlier, you were like a finely tuned engine. And even the engine of a Lamborghini or Ferrari needs servicing, needs looking after.
Yeah.
So if you were the Ferrari or the Lamborghini, you were being it without looking after it, without servicing it, weren't you?
Yeah.
And so now you're like, I have to do things differently.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing living rather than life means you're looking at, how do I be present? You used a phrase before we came on camera, which was, how do I lean into this?
Yeah.
I like that. How do you lean into life?
Yeah, lean into life, lean into things that I fully enjoyed, that made me feel good.
Yeah.
I became very in tune and aware of environments I liked, environments I didn't like, and go. And actually, interesting enough, a lot of the stuff that I'd been working so hard to succeed in doing was the stuff really that was more detrimental. I found I didn't really like to be at press parties or things like that, or people I didn't really know,
because you're putting on a facade.
I those are the times that I felt more anxious. Being at home with my family, being with my friends, being in a familiar environment, being with my team, these are the things that then I lent into. So I thought, okay, how do I get more of this? And this is not even like going on for years. This has just been the last year since my dad passed away, that now I've started to try and change and make actions of my life that fit that, because I think if it didn't happen, I probably was only going to go one way.
Well, I said earlier, there is a gift in grief. There is a moment that you get to decide that this can be used for something. Your dad would have definitely wanted that. Whether he would have agreed with every decision you make in life remains to be seen, but he would definitely have wanted you to be healthy and happy because you've already proved that you're successful. That's what he would have wanted. I'm absolutely sure of that. Just like any parent really fundamentally wants that for their child. So you have restructured your life, but you've done something quite extraordinary as well, which is the work that you've done in these 4 clinics. You've managed to create a whole brand that's doing really, really well. So before we talk about the more, being present and all of that, I want to make sure that we talk about this thing that you've done with your business as well.
I think what I started to look at was, because a lot of people were like, oh, build more clinics, do more clinics. And that was going to take away more time for me being home and being with the family. And so I was looking at things that could grow and touch people, but not necessarily have me to be there all the time. And I knew that then had to move from services into products.
Yeah.
So we launched a range of my cosmeceutical products, Esho. And we launched that first from our own e-com, and that went global. We then went into Sephora, Beauty Bay, ASOS, also now going to be on Amazon at the end of the month. And that's been really great because also it's brought in my partner, Laura. She's involved in the business from an operation point of view. And even my son, he's 4 years old, but we're going to be bringing in kids products in there.
Oh,
and
wow.
He's going to be, for that, the face of that, he's going to be a baby doctor, a baby version of me.
That is so cool.
So cool. Yeah. We're going to call him Baby Roro. Roman is his name. So, Dr. Roro. So he's looking forward to that and likes that. So I think it's now starting to find ways of, like you say, putting that stuff that I'm leaning into that, and, I'll be the first to admit, I think I was very close to years back before that, probably losing all of that because I was so focused on the work, that put strain on our relationship. We were distant, even though we were in the same house, we were just passing ships, and you just get so focused on that as your validation. You see that to be the thing that tells you are doing well, and that's your love, but it isn't,
No.
And I think a lot of people do get trapped into this, that the amount of comments or likes, followers, awards, shows, fame is going to fulfill them on the inside. It isn't.
It really doesn't.
It's an inside job. You need to work on that part. That part can be okay if you are okay inside.
You can have it all.
You can have it all, but
you got to work out how.
You got to work out
because it certainly isn't by aiming for only the validation from, like you say, the accolades. That's really nice. Really nice. It's nice to have nice things. It's nice to go to nice places. But if you're lonely because you've lost your family, because your friends think you're a bit of a prick, it's not really that enjoyable anymore, is it?
It's not. It's all fleeting.
It is, yeah.
I always talk about it now, and it's not that I don't take it for granted, but my missus would be the first one to say, if I get a nice new watch or a new car or something, 2 weeks, I'm like, okay,
Well, because inherently we love nostalgia and we love newness.
Yeah.
And nostalgia is rose-tinted glasses a lot of the time. So it's not actually how it happened. It's how we want to believe it happened.
Yeah.
And the newness is that it's addiction, really, to the dopamine hit. And I've done it myself. I mean, I think when we first spoke on the phone, I remember talking about the watch thing. I was about to buy a Rolex, really, really close to it. And then I thought, I don't even wear watches. Why am I buying this? This is ridiculous. This is just to prove to someone somewhere, because I already know I'm doing well. I don't need to prove it to anybody else. I don't wear a watch. What am I doing? And I had a bit of a moment, which was, this is a slippery slope. And okay, if I get to a point where I really see something that I really, really want, it won't be a watch, then I'll buy it. But I will get a lot of use out of it as well. And I think that's I'm very aware, as you are in yourself, of my addiction to the newness feeling.
Yeah.
And that self-awareness, it's okay to like it, but be self-aware, be self-reflective. And I referenced a couple of times the 12 steps program. And on the fourth step on the 12-step program, which is all about addiction and recovery, is self-reflection. What are you doing to contribute to your addiction? What is going on for you? And that's why I was so pleased when you said earlier, I started this self-reflection journey, because self-reflection is another superpower.
It is.
Seeing yourself.
And I try and do that daily, because I think, I always say, not perfect. No one's perfect.
No.
You're always going to make mistakes. And even now, when I'm trying to lean into these things, you can fall back into old habits.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, give example, with the product line, it was going so well, all of a sudden I'm like, right, I need to do this region. We need to get to the States. We need to do this. And before I know it, I'm back in the loop. I'm canceling days that I should have been going out with family. You're doing all of those things and you're like, okay. And if I wasn't self-reflective as I am now, I would just keep going.
Yeah.
But if I sit down, then I go and I look and I go, actually, no, that shouldn't be there. That needs to be working out in that way. Then I'm a bit more judge it a bit better.
There's something there that's just cropped into my mind, and I'm going to ask you a question that hopefully makes some sense, because it's all just happened in my head right now. So when you're successful, there's usually like a rhythm to how you're successful. So obviously it requires some of your time. It requires knowledge and skill. It usually requires a good team, and it requires the vision. It also requires positioning yourself properly. And then the rhythmic acquisition starts to happen when you've got all of those foundation blocks in place. No one teaches you that stuff, although you probably can learn it now. But certainly when we were coming through business, no one was teaching the rhythmic acquisition. You were sort of like, just do it and try your best. And then you have to work it out as you go along. So with that rhythmic activity, with your product line, is it fair to say that with the right team and with the right rhythm, finding those foundation blocks that work for your business, that would happen anyway in America without you having to put too much into it?
Exactly. And it's almost just being patient and
correct
and doing that.
It's a virtue.
Right. It is. It's being patient and doing that. And if realizing if that comes, great.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, I'm okay as well.
It's
not, it's not that where it was before, this overwhelming this has to be, and it has to happen now. That's the difference, I think, in me now. I like to create, as you say, and creative, and I have many ideas that come from my head. But sometimes I'm like, okay, but do I have time to do that? No, okay, I'll leave it there.
Oh, see, that's power. Because I know I'm a bit like that. My head's fuzzing all the time with all these ideas and all these things I want to do. Some of them will never come to fruition. It's putting them down for a bit. Put
them on a shelf. I have this kind of now visual shelf, in my head where I have all these other ideas and projects that I want to do, and I put it aside. But then I look at what I'm trying to now form as what I see as my happiness,
Yeah.
And if it doesn't add to that or change that, then I'm not going to deal with it now.
So what is your happiness?
I think family, like, we were talking about in kids, and, that shiny car or shiny watch wheel, I get every single time I see my kids. Like, it doesn't get old. It just gets better.
Yeah.
And, my focus now is kind of taking from my learnings from my childhood to kind of give them some of the things I didn't have, and then give them the things that I did have.
Yeah.
And hopefully, drive them forward better than I did myself. That's kind of it for me. I like that. I think I was probably this year the happiest I was in my back garden with my mates I'd grown up from school. Our partners were all there, and our kids were all playing in the garden together. And I remember just looking across, seeing them playing, thinking, yeah, we've done well, and thinking that was the first time I think, yeah, we've done well. And people will think that's strange to say that, but in all the things I was doing before, whether it was a clinic, magazine, award, I felt a second of that, and then it was the next thing. But that I literally sat there staring, going,
And
no.
you leaned into it.
Yeah, leaned in, going, yeah, done well.
Isn't that amazing that in the end, those moments, which aren't actually those feelings of addiction, they're the it's almost like, you know, when you've been at the ocean all day and then you get to that place where the water is calm and you really just go, it's the calmness of recognizing that what you've got there, your friends, your family, in a very nice home, I'm sure, but it's that moment that makes you go, that's what it's about.
Yeah. And it was like you said, it didn't even matter where it would have been, whether it would have been in that house or anywhere. You realize at the moment, actually, with all of those things aside, this is the fundamental part of it all. You know, because we know, and as my dad said, you know, the media will build you up, build you down, and take you away or whatever. When all the noise is gone, this is what's left.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what matters. And so I think it's okay to want success.
Of course, it's important.
And
actually.
It's okay to have, like you say, I think live with intention and purpose, because that sometimes intertwines with success.
It does.
But I don't think it to become the reason that you validate your life based on that is a danger. I think validation comes from an inside job, and I think that's what I've learned.
It's really it's a beautiful thing to hear, but I know this, and you know this. Some people just can't connect to that.
No.
So if I look in the mirror, I don't always like what I see. Who does? But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, do I feel comfortable with who I am and what I am? Do I feel comfortable that, I know death is a difficult subject, but if I was to die, there would be people that went, do you know what? She did something good for me. Or she made me feel something good. There'll be people that would say the exact opposite, I'm sure.
Same.
But if there are people that say that, then that's what I aim for. The rest of it is like the icing on the cake. It's nice if you like icing, but you don't have to have that either. Some people are really comfortable with just, I say just as though it's less than, but I don't mean it like that. They're comfortable with their people, their family, their friends, and they don't have that intentional purpose to be successful, which is fine. But I think if you do have that, because it's a natural driver, it's a survival instinct, I think.
I think that's what it became.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it became, definitely.
That's why you mentioned earlier, a lot of successful people are scarred because they've actually had to drive forward through survival. And then if you can turn the survival into something that looks like success instead, then that pain does feel like it's got a purpose. And I think that's where it can become addictive. It's like, well, this is all I know. I have to survive.
So I have to keep doing it.
I have to keep doing it. And that, you talk about validation, but validation is actually about survival. People think it's quite vain almost to seek validation, but the reason people seek validation is because they're seeking acceptance, which equals safety. And the brain has evolved to look for safety. Validation is actually about safety, psychological safety. And those that seek psychological safety, i.e. validation, are those that have never been accepted fully. And that's why it can become such a problem. I believe in the people that I've worked with is you need the validation because you don't feel good enough. And if we can get you feeling good enough from a psychotherapy point of view, we can reprocess and reframe the way you see yourself, then actually the success becomes the icing on the cake, not the survival mechanism. And I think that's where you're at.
You're right, because I didn't feel for multiple reasons. I didn't because I was black. And how that I got treated that way. I didn't because of where I grew up and the classism and how I was treated in that way. I didn't because of my dad, even though he loved me, I didn't have that traditional love.
Yes.
You know, it was you'll get your grades and that's it. So for all of those reasons, I had that process of validation or searching it for safety.
You
know, and my dad dying and the different experiences I had through life were the ones that set me on the path of almost undoing that and recognizing that.
And learning. I think what you've learned is to finally accept yourself, probably more so. And I think this happens to a lot of people, including me, when you have children, through the eyes of your children, because you're like, I created that.
Yeah.
That beautiful, wonderful little thing. And nearly losing your son as well would have probably given you more of that, like, this thing that I love so much is from me. This is part of me. And I think that's when you start to see yourself a bit differently as well when you become a parent. Not for everybody, of course, but I think for you, certainly, that seems to have been a life-changing moment, alongside then losing your father, who gave you the mindset to chase the dream. And those two things combined, I think, have enabled you to see yourself in a very different way from what you're saying, and to accept yourself, but to know that you are also capable of the greatest of achievements also. So there's so many different layers there. Does it ever feel heavy?
Yeah.
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 I think it's felt heavy for the longest time.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, yeah, it's times like these and talks like these that help. They're therapeutic. You know, I think I kind of, you know, walk around with a smile. I go in there and I do about my day. So I don't think people do think that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I do get those moments all the time where I just, you know, that big,
yeah.
You know, it's a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and I, you know, but each time it gets easier. I think the more you work at it, the more you think about it, the more self-work you do, the easier it does become, because it just becomes more automatic how you deal with things and how things happen and how you run your own life. I think we were both talking about that.
Yeah.
You take steps to adjust things in your own life that then make it easier for you as well.
And that's where you have to realize that it is choices in the end. And we had a chat about, before we recorded, about unconscious bias, and I was saying I really struggle with unconscious bias because I think everything comes down to choice in the end. You know, if you're going to be prejudiced in any way, okay, perhaps you're not as educated as you could be, but you have a choice as to whether you vocalize it in that way, in a certain way that is fueled by arrogance, hatred, whatever. So when it comes to your own success, your own peace, your own life, it is the choices that you make. And that's where self-reflection is an amazing tool. But I think when people talk about self-reflection, they talk about it as though it's the solution. And actually, self-reflection can be probably the most painful bit.
It is.
It is a solution in the end when you do the work, but self-reflection, I think the reason people don't do it is because you don't always like what you're seeing.
What you're seeing.
Yeah.
You don't like the things you have to think about. You
Yeah.
don't like to look at the mistakes you have made.
Yeah.
You know, but I think if you do face them, you do get on the other side where then you start finding answers.
And do you accept, because I always say that if there's sides of every part of us, I don't always think that people would like every part of me. And that's okay, because I probably don't like every part of them, because we all present a version of ourselves, don't we?
Yeah.
But I'm very honest about the fact that I'm certainly not always going to be likable, because I'm not always liking myself either. So if I can say that, then I can see that other people would say that too. I would like to think that I try my best, but that doesn't always mean that I am my best. And I think if you could summarize, and this is tough, if you could summarize how you feel about yourself as an individual with all of the experiences that we've talked about today, how would you describe yourself? With honesty.
Yeah. I would say myself, and is it in one word or multiple?
No, you can have a paragraph if you like.
I would say someone with hyper ability to continue to strive forward, but needs to recognize his own limitations so they don't become his own detriment.
I love that.
Yeah.
So there's often, from the sound of it, you know, that heaviness is working out where that spot is, the soft spot where you are recognizing your own limitations but still driving forward.
Yeah.
That's why that's heavy.
Yeah.
When you've got the hyper ability to be successful and strive and determined and all of that, to then know when your limits have been reached. Whoa.
Yeah.
Tough.
Yeah.
And this is why you said earlier, people look at the shiny objects and go, well, you're lucky because you've got all this. But I think, actually, I'm not saying you're in turmoil all the time, don't get me wrong, but to figure that space out, I want all of this stuff because I've worked for it and I'm clever and, and I've worked bloody hard from all the way through school and to where I am now. But equally, I want to be able to have those moments in the back garden with my friends and my family and the time to be present.
To be present.
And okay, you can have the watch on your arm, but like I said before, if you're not being present and you haven't got the time to be with those that you love and to be a role model in the healthy way for those, then is it worth it? And that heaviness of, where do I go here? Without, I know you have got your mentors or you have had your mentors, but I think it's still you at the end of the day that's got to make that happen.
Yeah.
It's still on you.
It is. And it's even harder now because it's my dad passed last year. We made that transition from, like, almost, I would say, captain soldier before passing to them being truly father son after graduate.
Wow.
And it's stuff like that I spoke to him about. Those are the bits that I was coming into that part of my life where I was trying to figure that out, or reflect on that and say those things to him, like, Dad, how do you do this? How do you figure out this? How do you juggle the family and doing this, trying to find those answers? Because you only learn through experience.
Yes, you do. You really do.
You can't, yes, no matter how much anyone tells you, it's only through experience, and, I think Law and I talk about this now. We say the amount of stuff we have been through together. We're like, my God. But it almost then also makes us a strength because we have been through all of it. Yeah. So there's nothing really, I don't think that's going to surprise us enough to be anything now. But with that does become baggage, as you say, and then comes the pressure, and you want to try and move away from that.
Yeah.
And build a life the way you see it as now.
I mean, I said earlier before, it's cheeseball, but it is a journey. And everything that you've spoken about is that old saying, which is, this too shall pass. Whatever it is, good and bad, this too shall. So you have to understand the happy moments are fleeting. The painful moments are fleeting. It's the choices that you make along the way that make the difference. And what's very interesting about you is, and about everybody actually, is that someone might walk past you in the street, right? They've not seen your face before, so they don't know who you are. And you told me a story earlier about the area you were walking with the pram. A man saw you and said, what house are you dreaming of buying?
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to him, you owned one of the houses and he actually didn't. But he made an assumption about you. And when I talk to people, be it that they're clients or be it on this podcast, I am just, there's moments that you've spoken about today where I've just gone, my jaw, for those that are listening, not watching, my jaw drops. And I have had those moments with you today. And I think people will see Dr. Esho, the character that's out there, and, they won't necessarily know all of this about you.
Oh, definitely not. I think I've said stuff that I haven't said on some podcasts. So you're very good.
I appreciate that.
No. You got that on me. But you're right, because I think social media shows this curation of life, right?
Yeah.
And no one really gets it,
Yes.
Everybody thinks it's all smiles and ponies and everything is all nice. And, I do try and share some of the lows as well as the wins, because I do think there needs to be a balance.
Yes.
But, as you said, I think probably a lot of people get to know what in my mind internally I do struggle with.
Yeah.
And I might not say as much because I don't want to come across as ungrateful.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't, certainly not today. I think actually what I've seen of you, this is just my opinion, is the humbleness, the realness, which I said at the very beginning, we're going to see the realness. And I think there's a lot of pain in your story. I think even from the racism point of view and not necessarily feeling loved. And I just think if anyone's listening to this and, you know, you've been racist or you've had thoughts that actually are quite prejudiced, this story alone should tell you, like, this is a good man that's had so much to offer people, that's worked so hard, that's got so much love, that's got so much pain. Don't be horrible to people. You know, if you don't be horrible to people, listen to people, talk to people, because the story that you've told me today, my heart's at times been like, I've watery eyes, particularly when you talk about the baby thing, and then when you talk about your dad. Like, but then there's been times as well I felt immensely proud of you, and I barely know you. You know, and all those emotions that I felt just listening to you within a short period of time. When you really listen to people, and this is what I aim to do with the podcast, is to connect people through stories, because we've lost community and we've lost that ability to see people because we're all so busy, like you're saying. We don't really pay attention to anyone. But, you know, when I'm sitting on a train, or if I'm just walking through, you know, the street, going from one end to the other, and I see someone, I never just assume anything anymore, because I just see that everyone's got this story.
Everyone's got a story.
Everyone's got a story, and yours is really powerful. And thank you. I'm really so privileged to have been able to sit with you and listen to it, because it's touched me in lots of different ways and inspired me actually in lots of different ways. And I'm hoping, and I know actually, that it will have that effect on other people too. What's the kind of, if there's a young person who's perhaps entrepreneurial or creative and wants to be in business, what's a couple of top tips?
I think, you know, one of my biggest ones, and I think we were talking about it just off air, is at the beginning, try and figure out in your head when enough is enough.
Yeah, map that out.
If you can figure that out and then work backwards,
yes,
I think you're onto something there.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of us, when we are entrepreneurial, we want to do something, we then get blinkered and we put our heads down.
Yeah.
And what happens is the goalpost continues to change and continues to shift, and it keeps going. And that's when that addiction comes into it, being addicted to sex, keep going. And we forget what we saw as that kid as being enough.
Yeah.
And it's funny you just said that, because it just reminded me of a conversation I had it with Tommy Mallet, so Mallet Trainers. Oh, yeah. And he was in clinic, and we were talking about this, because he has had these issues with mental health as well. We were talking about,
he was on the telly, wasn't
he? Yeah. And we both said, because we said, if we were the kids, you know, back then growing up, and we are where we are now, would we be happy? And he was like, yeah. Because that's back then what we have, or even less than what we had, we would have been happy with.
Yeah.
So why are we continuously pushing on this? You know, and I think so, knowing, because there will always be the bigger car, there will always be the bigger house, there will always be the thing, you know, learning when enough can be enough is so important, because I think if you can do that, then you can find balance better. Absolutely.
But the other thing that strikes me is what your mum said to you after you had that incident with the woman that didn't want you to go near her baby, which was, know who you are.
Yeah.
Know who you are. If you are a young person in business, don't matter what your background is, it doesn't matter what opportunities your family has had before you, know who you are and know when enough is enough. Yeah. And I think believing in yourself is tough if other people don't believe in you. But again, this is why I wanted you on, because I think someone listening to you would go, yes, like I can believe in me too, especially if you're a kid at school and the teachers aren't quite seeing that the reason that you're not behaving, I say that in inverted commas because sometimes you are behaving, you're just bored. You know, if you're that kid, believe in yourself, trust in yourself, know you've got, because I think one of the things I always say is that kids are often taught not to listen to their instinct, to their intuition, because the system, societal, you know, you get labeled, but you know, as a kid, you know who you are. Kids are actually much more savvy than we give them credit for. And you just need one person to say that, even if it's through a podcast, even if it's your mum's listened to this and she shares it with you, or your dad. Know who you are, trust in that. but also define we don't teach kids to define happiness.
No.
We teach kids what we expect.
Mm.
So define happiness with your kids, or let them do that for themselves. You know, one of the things I used to absolutely love when I was a kid was making mud pies. I absolutely loved making mud pies, and it made me very, very happy. I'd get excited about it. So what that teaches me is that something that I must do and don't do enough of, but will go back to doing, is being in nature, because I love it. It genuinely brings me joy. So if I can create more of that within the work that I do, then that's superb. So it's those things that you can really understand about your kids and nurture it in them, and let them nurture that within themselves, because that's the key to success, isn't it?
Definitely.
If you can combine that with what you do as a job, great.
Definitely. No, I agree with you on that.
So lots of brilliant moments today.
Thank you.
And again, like I said at the beginning, you're a very, very busy man. So I really, really appreciate your time today.
I honestly love the moment coming down here today. And honestly, like I said, this is therapeutic for me, in honesty. And I think definitely when, I go on my car journey back, I'll be reflecting on it as well and going through bits too.
Well, I can't wait to share it with everybody.
Appreciate it.
And just, if anything, I want to say that not only have you inspired me, but I think you've made me realize a lot about, I said something earlier about the emotional immaturity, a lot about how to be gracious and how to be accepting without just ignoring. And I want to thank you for that today.
Oh, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, it was lovely.
Yeah, it was. I could have spoken to you for hours.
Oh, that was lovely.